Okay, so hi everyone, and welcome to our ReMaker Space single-use plastics workshop. So today we are going to be focusing on creating a circular economy, how plastics play a role in our environment, and how you can take action to reduce the amount of plastic waste from entering the environment. Okay, so first, I would like to do a land acknowledgement, and I'd like to acknowledge that I live in Toronto on Treaty 13, which is home to many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. So, just a little bit about myself. For those of you who are new to our green learning workshops, welcome. I do recognize a few of your schools here, so welcome back. But just a little bit about myself to start off with. My name is Katie and I'm the Environmental Education Engagement Manager. I have a background in environmental science, specifically in conservation and biodiversity. So I've had a lot of opportunities to work in different areas of the environment and to work with different wildlife species. But now, as part of the green learning team, I really work in developing and providing workshops across different environmental topics, okay, such as this one in single-use plastics. So just a little bit about green learning for those of you who may not be as familiar with our organization, but we do focus on clean energy, climate change, green economy, and we really work in supporting you students, okay, and providing you guys with different activities, challenges, resources, and we really want to be able to engage you guys and empower you to use your voice to convey what is really important to you in terms of the environment. So during today's session, I want you guys to understand how single-use plastics impact our environment. I want you to gain an understanding into how we create that circular economy, okay? And so we'll talk a bit more about what a circular economy specifically is, but we're gonna talk about how we're gonna convert our current economy to one that's circular. And then I want you guys to critically think about how to turn single-use plastics into something purposeful to support climate action. So we're gonna have some brainstorming sessions, some games. We'll have a couple activities also, okay? So we're going to start off with plastics, okay? And plastic is everywhere. I'm sure if you look around your classroom right now, you can see a whole bunch of different plastics. If you think about being at home, what sort of plastic you see there. So what are plastics? So plastics are those items that are made by us, humans, okay, out of chemicals that can be shaped or molded to create different items, okay? So these are, again, like thinking about what's around your classroom or what's at home, thinking about plastic toys, plastic bags, plastic straws, plastic bottles, okay? So it could be your shampoo bottle. So a lot of things that we use in our day-to-day lives are made of plastic, and our plastic production has increased so much over the years. Now, every year, more than 400 million, over 400 million tons of plastic is produced around the world. So that's a ton of plastic that is entering into our environment. So we have what's called plastic pollution, and plastic pollution focuses on the entire life cycle of plastic. So this looks at the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted. So say carbon dioxide that's released when you're making a plastic product. But plastic pollution can also refer to plastic waste that actually ends up in our environment and our waterways. So thinking about larger plastic items and also thinking about those larger plastic items and breaking apart and breaking down into what we call microplastics, okay? And these are those tiny pieces of plastic, and they can be so tiny that you might not even see them. So we're going to start with a quick brainstorming session. And like I said, we use plastic in our day-to-day lives, whether that's a pen we're using, or if you think about a fruit container that you might have in your fridge at home, okay, plastics are all over the place. And we'll get into these types of plastics shortly, but I really want you to think about the impacts that plastics have on the environment and who do they impact. So I'm going to put a 1-minute timer up, and what I want you guys to do is either turn to the person next to you or talk about this as a whole class and come up with different ideas on what you think the impact of plastic waste or plastic pollution has on our environment, and then we'll have a discussion, okay? So I'm going to put 1 minute up. So you guys have 1 minute there. So what impact does plastic waste or plastic pollution have on the environment? And think about who do they impact? Okay, last 20 seconds. All right, so would anybody like to share some of their ideas that they've come up with on impacts of plastic waste and plastic pollution on our environment? Damages the environment, and animals eat the plastic thinking it's food. Animals can choke on the plastic. Yes, it's a big one. We'll end up on a land dump or in the oceans. Yes, so it affects people and animals. See plastic in out of food containers, toys, supplies, impacts marine life. Animals get stuck in the plastics. Yes. Health issue for humans and animals. Plastic ends up in the ocean. Microplastics. Definitely. Microplastics are a huge thing with plastics ending up in our environment. Spoil the soil and water. They're not biodegradable, and so they'll sit in a landfill site. Yeah. And it can take hundreds to thousands of years for plastics to break down. Those are great ideas. Any other ideas? Sent overseas instead of recycling our own waste? Yeah. Think of any other impacts of plastic? You're also welcome to turn your mic on if you'd prefer to say it. Atmospheric pollution from plastic manufacturing and burning. Yeah, animals starve to death by eating plastic. It melts down into the environment, turns into microplastics. Yep. Yeah, these are all really great ideas.
One of my grade 4 students said that plastic is really hard to break down and get rid of.
Absolutely. Yeah, so you guys have just come up with so many different ideas here. I'm so impressed with all these different ideas you guys have come up with and really have gotten you guys thinking about the impacts of plastic on our environment. Oh, you see a couple more here. Plastics end up going down storm drains. Yeah, yeah, definitely. If you guys have more ideas, you guys can just plop them into the chat there. Yeah, environmental impact of mining for oil, pollution, soil loss, water waste. Yeah. All right, some great ideas here. So I'm going to show you actually what I've come up with for how plastic waste or plastic pollution impacts the environment. So the first one I have here is reduces ecosystem function and impacts animals, which is exactly what you guys said, right? These animals end up eating the plastic, they can choke on them. It can also alter our habitats, okay, and alter the ecosystems and natural processes. So it ends up causing an overall impact on the ability of an ecosystem to actually be able to adapt to our changing climates, okay? Another one is plastic waste and plastic pollution can impact livelihoods. So it impacts jobs, and what that can cause is economic loss, okay, which is losing of money. And so when you think about when I just mentioned reducing ecosystem function, which can cause harm to marine life, right? Like what you guys mentioned, it gets into our oceans. So if someone has a livelihood of being a fisherman or a fisherwoman, right? That livelihood, their livelihood is dependent on healthy fish that they can catch and they can sell, right? But if fish are ingesting all this plastic and if they're not healthy, those people's livelihoods can decrease, right? Because they're not able to sell that healthy fish. It can also cause tourism decline, okay? So say there was a place in the world that you really wanted to travel to, it looked absolutely beautiful, and it used to be filled with so many tourists, but now there's all this plastic buildup, right? People may not want to visit those areas as much, right? So where those companies and those people relied on tourists to bring in money, right? Tourists are no longer coming because there's so much plastic buildup. So it can really heavily influence livelihoods. Also with food production, okay? So microplastics, like you guys said, get into the food chain, right? So, and plastics can impact soil, so which then impacts agriculture and crop production, right? And plastics are made up of so many different chemicals that can be harmful, which can then impact our overall well-being. So now we're going to look at types of single-use plastics. So the words are a little big and sometimes a little tricky to pronounce here. But I want you guys to focus on what the different types of plastics are when I give you the examples. So our first one here is polyethylene terephthalate, okay? So PET. And this is a lightweight and strong, it's usually a transparent plastic so you can see right through it. So an example of this would be a plastic water bottle, okay? And so all our plastic water bottles that you may see are made from this type of plastic. You can also find it with food packaging or even fabrics in the form of polyester. And then we have high density polyethylene, which is HDPE, and this is a really strong plastic. And this plastic actually has that ability to resist any type of moisture. So it's really good for food packaging and especially for beverage containers like milk. So you can see this photo here with a milk jug. It's also a plastic that can be used for shampoo bottles, okay? So any sort of liquid where it's moisture resistant. And then we have low density polyethylene, which is LDPE. And this plastic is considered to be softer or much more flexible. So if you think about plastic wrap that you have used before to cover food or anything like that, that's this type of plastic. You know that it's a lot softer, you can really move it around. This plastic is also found on the liner that's inside a juice carton. And then we have linear low density polyethylene, LLDPE, and this plastic is very tear or puncture resistant. So for example, a plastic bag. And if you think about when plastic bags were a lot more prevalent and they were used a lot more and you put all your groceries in, right? It would kind of stretch, but it wouldn't necessarily tear, okay? And then we have polypropylene, which is PP, and this plastic can stretch a bit more, but it still keeps its shape. So thinking about a potato chip bag, when you stick your hand into a potato chip bag and you're reaching in trying to grab the chip, the bag is kind of expanding based on how your hand is pushing against the side, right? But it's still going to keep its shape. And then finally, we have our polystyrene, okay, PS, and this is considered a diverse plastic. And when I talk about being a diverse plastic, I mean that it can be recycled and returned to its original state, okay? So for example, these red party cups. So we're gonna shift over to our economy and we're gonna look at how people make and spend their money, okay? And so an economy is this system that really helps people and businesses exchange money, goods, services. So if you had a job, for instance, you were a teacher, right? You make your money and then you're gonna go spend your money on groceries, you're gonna go shopping, okay? So when you spend that money is going to go into businesses where they can then pay their workers, right? So that they can buy things that they may need for their business or for their employees, okay? And this cycle just continues, okay? Where you make money and then you use that money and it goes to somebody else, okay? So we're gonna look specifically at Canada's economy. And Canada currently has what we call a linear economy. And this is where products are made, they're used, and then they're thrown away. And this is a classic example of single-use plastics. So I want you to think about if you've gone into a restaurant and you get something to drink and they bring you a straw, right? So they've made this straw, they've distributed it to you in your glass. You're going to use that plastic straw, but it's just going to get thrown out in the end. So what we want to do though is turn that linear economy into a circular economy. So we want to take something, we want to make it, we want to use it, but then we want to remake it into something else or reuse it into something else, okay? Before we actually end up throwing it out or recycling it, okay? So we want to repair or reuse it instead of replacing it. So we're going to play a quick game of true or false. So in your classes, if you think the answer is true, I want you guys to put your thumbs up. If you think it's false, put your thumbs down. And if you're not really sure, you can put your thumbs in the middle. And then there's going to be a Zoom poll on the screen. And teachers, if you can log the answers, okay, for the majority. So our first one here is true or false. 90% of plastics in Canada are recycled. Do we think 90% of plastics in Canada get recycled? See some answers still coming in. Give you guys a few more seconds here. See a true in the chat there. Okay. So most of you have said false here. A couple of you have said true. So let's see what the answer is. So it is false, okay? So only 9% of plastic is recycled in Canada. So that's a really small amount. And recycling is a really great way to keep waste out of our landfills. And it also allows us to produce things on a larger scale and to look at more sustainable practices. Okay. Our next one is over 35% of plastic is considered single use. True or false? More than 35% of plastic is for single use. And remember, single use is being used one time only. See a false and a true in the chat. Okay, final couple seconds here. Okay, so most of you have said that this is true. You guys would be right, yeah. So actually between 40 to 50% of plastics are considered single use, so one-time use only. And in 2021, about 139 million tons of single-use plastic waste was created. So that's a ton of plastic. And if you're trying to think about how much that is, think about the Eiffel Tower in Paris, okay? Whether you've seen a picture of it, whether you've seen it in person, I want you guys to think that 139 million tons of single-use plastic is more than 13,000 Eiffel Towers. That's a ton of plastic. Okay, our next one. True or false? Plastic waste in the environment will break down completely over time. Give you guys a few more seconds here. All right. So most of you have said false. There's a couple trues here. So let's see. So the answer is false. So to break down plastic, it's really difficult. And in a natural environment, plastic breaks apart and not down. So when plastic breaks apart into these smaller pieces, those plastics are what we call microplastics. And they're found everywhere in our environment. They're found in our waterways. They're found in our ecosystems. Right. Our other true and false is creating a circular economy will help fight climate change, biodiversity loss, waste, and pollution. Is that true or false? Remember, circular economy is the make and then remake and repurpose. You guys a few more seconds here. Final answers. All right. Awesome. You guys have all said true. So yes, a circular economy, remember, remaking it, repurposing it, okay? It focuses on that rather than throwing those items out, okay? So plastics remain out of the water systems and off of our land. So next we're going to look at what you can do to start taking action. So first what you can do is refuse. And by refusing, you are no longer buying or using items that are considered single use. So for example, no longer using a plastic straw or using a plastic water bottle, okay? Maybe you have a reusable, maybe you have a favorite reusable water bottle that you want to use instead, okay? And then we're going to reduce, and this involves using less wasteful materials. For example, when drinking a soda, maybe you don't use a straw, okay? Maybe when you're at a restaurant, instead of having a straw, you just drink from that. Or if you have the can, you don't use a straw. And then with reusing, you are using items more than once or multiple times. For example, instead of using a paper towel to wipe something up, maybe you wipe up a spill with some sort of cloth that can be washed again and reused. And then recycling, making sure that you are recycling items so they can be made into something else. For instance, a recycled steel can can be used to create a reusable water bottle. And then one of my favorite ones is repurposing, and this can be kind of fun, where you're finding new ways to use items that may be thrown out. And this is also known as upcycling. For example, if you have some sort of plastic bottle, it could be a plastic water bottle, it could be a plastic shampoo bottle, could be anything, okay? And maybe you make a bird feeder or a planter. And you could do this in your classroom, you could do this at home. So many different ways that you can repurpose single-use plastics. So our next activity is what happens next. And there's going to be one item on the screen, and I want you guys to type into the chat what you think will most commonly happen to this piece of trash once it's being used. So our first one are plastic water bottles. So what happens to a plastic water bottle after it's being used? Do you think it gets recycled, gets put into the landfill, or do you think it gets incinerated or burned? Okay, what do you guys think? See recycled. Yeah, see more recycled. Landfilled or incinerated. Okay, yeah. So after we use that water bottle, do we think it's recycled, landfilled, or incinerated? Any final thoughts? Recycled, burned, recycled, landfill, recycle. Okay. All right. So with a plastic water bottle, so approximately 70% of plastic water bottles are recycled, okay, into something new. And this could be a reusable bag. So if you've ever gone to the grocery store and you've seen those reusable bags that are on sale, sometimes you can see on the side of the bag, it'll say this reusable bag was made from this number of plastic water bottles. Plastic water bottles can also be made into clothing. But then we do have this 30% number here where plastic water bottles do end up in the landfill. And the problem with ending up in the landfill is that it can take up to hundreds to thousands of years in order for this water bottle to completely break apart and break down into nothing. Okay, what happens to a smartphone after it's being used? Does it get recycled, go to the landfill? Is it incinerated or is it burned? What do you think? We think about a phone and like electronics, okay? Electronic devices. Landfill, landfill. Incinerated, recycled. Landfill. Landfill and some parts are recycled. Recycled parts and landfill, yeah, recycled. Landfill and recycled. Cycle. Landfill and incinerated. Incinerated and recycle. Right, any final thoughts on whether a phone would be recycled, landfilled, or burned or incinerated? Most are landfill, then second is incinerated, and third is recycled. Okay. All right. So you guys are all right, okay? So 41 million tons of e-waste is produced each year globally, okay? So less than 16% of phones are actually recycled. And when phones end up in landfills, they can produce a toxic chemical that they end up giving off, okay? And there's what we call waste pickers. And these are individuals that actually go through trash. And unfortunately, due to these harmful toxins that are given off by the phones, they can end up causing health issues to these individuals who are going through trying to sort through the trash there, okay? And also in some countries that don't have proper disposal regulations, some phones end up in the incinerator or end up being burned. So it's really important to properly dispose of your e-waste. And what you can do, if you're not sure where your e-waste can go, you can search for an electronic recycling center near you. So I'm based in Toronto. So one of the many centers here is the Electronic Recycling Association. So it provides recycling options, it provides pickup services, donation programs. I do also know Best Buy does have a program where you can drop off your e-waste. So definitely check out your area and see where you can properly dispose of your e-waste. And then how about an aluminum can? What happens to an aluminum can after it's being used? Do you think it gets recycled, put in the landfill, or is it incinerated or burned? see recycled. Recycled or landfill. Incinerated and recycled. Recycled and landfill. Yeah. Listed from most likely to least. Recycled, incinerated, landfill. Okay. Any final thoughts? Whether an aluminum can be recycled, if it's put in the landfill, or if it's incinerated or burned? Right. Okay. So aluminum cans are highly recyclable and they can actually be turned into new cans, and recycling takes a lot less energy than creating new cans from raw materials, okay? Those cans that do end up in landfills are usually those cans that aren't properly cleaned out, okay? So we always have to make sure to clean out the cans once we've used them, because again, if they end up in the landfill, they can take hundreds to thousands of years to completely break apart and break down fully. So I'm going to show you guys a really neat video here. This is Nzambi Mati, and she is the founder of Jenge Makers, and her organization is driven by a concern for the problem of plastic pollution and the housing crisis in Kenya. And Kenya's in Africa, and there's an area there called Nairobi, and they produce about 500 tons of plastic pollution every single day, and over 2 million households in Kenya don't have proper housing, okay? So she's come up with a way to turn plastic into housing structures. So I'm going to play this video for you.
Let's turn trash into cash. My name is Nzambi Mate. I'm the founder of Jenge Makers Limited, and we convert plastic waste into building products. Plastic waste is not just a Kenya problem, but it's a worldwide problem. And here in Nairobi, we generate about 500 metric tons of plastic waste every single day, and only a fraction of that is recycled. We decided, what more can we do instead of just sitting in the sidelines and complaining? Essentially, companies have to pay to dispose the waste. So we solve their problem. The waste essentially comes for free. This is the plastic waste we get from factories. With this, we mix with sand, as the plastic is like the binder. We have 3 machines. The extruder does the mixing of plastic waste with sand at very high temperatures, and then the press compresses it. Plastic is fibrous in nature, and so therefore the brick ends up having a stronger compression strength. Does that look like waste to you? It's almost half the weight, so therefore during transportation and installation it's faster in terms of cost implication. We right now have a capacity of producing 1,000 to 1,500 bricks a day. So far we have recycled 20 metric tons, and we are looking to push that value to 50 by the end of next financial year. Winning the Young Champions of the Earth award is a huge motivation booster for us as a team. It's been a long 3-year journey, and so this was like someone saying, I see what you're doing and I appreciate that. And with this platform, we're looking to see how we can get on both partners to scale this solution, not just in Kenya, but all over Africa, just to start. And in addition to that, be able to impact and motivate other people and other youths to do similar things in different places. So right now we are just making paving blocks, but we now want to make actual building blocks. As I like saying, you have to be true to your why. Why are you doing this? What is the motivation behind it? For me, I was just tired of being in the sidelines of seeing plastic. I ideally jumped in off a cliff without even a parachute. I was building it as I was falling down. But isn't that how great things are done? So act for nature.
Okay. Okay, so using plastic, her company was able to create housing structures using bricks created out of recycled plastic, and these structures ended up being about 7 times stronger than concrete blocks, all the while being lighter in weight. And in 2023, a really cool fact here is through this initiative, about 25 tons of plastic was able to be recycled. So for this activity, what I want you guys to do is you're going to either work in small groups, the person beside you, or you can do this as a class if you want. But what I want you to do is think about one way to reduce plastic waste in your daily life, okay? And then I want you guys to think of ways to encourage people in your community to be mindful of recycling. So how to recycle more or properly. So I'm going to give you guys about 2 minutes on the timer here, and then we'll to come up with different ideas, and then we'll have a quick discussion about it, okay? So 2 minutes. Go. So how can you reduce plastic in your daily life? And how can you encourage people in your community to recycle more and properly? Okay, final minute here. Come up with any ideas that you can on how you can reduce plastic in your daily life and how you can encourage more people. Okay, final 20 seconds. All right, would anybody like to share their ideas? I can see some ideas already came into the chat here about don't use single-use plastics. Education is key. It is very key, right? Yes. Promoting plastic awareness during Earth Day and week. Yep. See, buy and use a reusable water bottle instead of plastic water bottles. Bring reusable bags when you go to the grocery shopping. Try to reuse any plastic bags that you might need to be bought. Use metal spoons and forks instead of plastic ones. Yeah, reusable straws, metal or silicone. Use materials made out of metal or glass. Use reusable water bottles. Turn old plastic into something different like the bricks. Absolutely. Stop buying plastic that's not recyclable. Yeah, sorting posters. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, making sure that everybody is aware where each item should be placed. Yeah. Yeah, again, it comes back to that education, right? Being able to educate others. Try not to use single-use plastics and reuse plastics you have. Nations to teach people to sort. Absolutely. Reusable bags, wasteless lunches, talking with your family and friends to bring awareness. Absolutely. Yeah, these are all such great ideas, and you can see education is so key in getting your message across. Does anybody have any final thoughts before I pull up the next activity here? guys, I can pull this up. So our next activity that I want you guys to do now is I want you to get creative. So here I have a yogurt cup or a plastic cutlery, okay, example of a single-use plastic. But if you think of a different single-use plastic that has come to mind, what I want you guys to do is turn a single-use plastic, either yogurt cup, plastic cutlery, or any other one that you have, into something purposeful, okay? So I'm gonna put up about a 2-minute timer here, and I want you guys to, again, either turn to the person next to you or work together to come up with some sort of invention. Okay, so we're gonna have 2 minutes here, and then we'll have a discussion. Replace plastic with cloth wherever possible. Yeah, giving incentives to encouraging recycling. Put paper in the recycling bin. Yes. Okay, so what could you make out of a single-use plastic item? See a bird feeder, turn it into a mini watering can lantern. Right, just under a minute. Any final ideas? See so many great ideas coming into the chat here. Right, final 10 seconds. Okay, so if you haven't put your ideas in the chat yet, put them in now. I can see here we have flower and seed pot, cereal containers for art, water containers for painting and planting. Yeah, music shakers. Yeah, lots of plant pots, arts and crafts, plant flowers, make a pencil and crayon holder, a bird feeder. Yeah, puppet nose, music shakers. Yogurt cups as building blocks to play with. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else have any ideas of what they might want to make? These are some really great ideas, guys. Okay. Well, in saying that, what I want to do is encourage you guys to take the Eco 360 challenge, okay? I want you guys to take your ideas that you just put in the chat there and turn your upcycling plan into a creation. I want you to think about how you interact with plastics, and I want you to be able to educate others and take action. Okay, so we've had a whole bunch of different challenge submissions from the past, and some of these ones have been even taking single-use bottle caps, and we had a class that actually made a huge mural that they put out into their schoolyard with these single-use bottle caps. Okay, so there's so many different ways that you guys can get creative and get inventive and come up with something. And not only do you get to learn more about single-use plastics and the importance of keeping plastic waste out of our environment, but you guys also have a chance as a class to win up to $1,000, okay? And registration is open, and submissions aren't actually due until May 9th, so you have tons of time, and we will have a link going into the chat there for you guys for the Eco 360 challenge as well as the registration. So definitely check this out and see how you can turn your upcycling plan into some sort of creation, okay? So we also want to know about your actions that you're taking for Earth Month, okay? So are these actions where you guys are going to be doing a cleanup, a waste-free lunch? Are you going to be doing one of our challenges like the Eco 360 challenge, okay? We want you to use your voice through creativity to create an e-card about what's important to you, okay? That could be something that's important as single-use plastics that you've seen here today, okay? And you want to create a message about how they can impact our environment and how you plan to take action to reduce the amount of plastic waste in the environment. But our e-cards tool is also a really great way to share your learnings when taking the challenges, okay? So that's part of our challenges, is that you guys have to come up with a way to share your learnings, and creating an e-card is a wonderful way to do that. But if you're also passionate about another environmental topic, or you want to bring awareness to a certain environmental topic, you can create an e-card. Any e-card for Earth Month will go a long way, okay? It's a great way to come up with a message and artwork, and for you to share it with us here at GreenLearning, for us to share with our network. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for allowing me into your classroom today. I've had a lot of fun with you guys. You guys have come up with so many great ideas. And if you guys are interested in that challenge, I really do encourage you guys to take it as a class. I do have a student survey there up on the screen. Teachers, you can scan that QR code there, and you can either fill this out as one big group, or if the students want to do it individually, that they can also do that. If you guys have any questions, I will be staying online, but if you have questions outside of this, feel free to connect with us at programs@greenlearning.ca. But thank you so much again for having me. I hope you guys really enjoyed this workshop.